Welcome back to another Mech Deck Tech. Today we have a custom build for you. This one is featuring Caradora, Heart of Alacria. So this is from the new Aether Drift set. We're doing mounted vehicles and a little bit of +1/+1 counter synergies to kind of boost them up. But before we dive on in, this episode, as all episodes, are brought to you by Arcane Fortress, makers of fine TCG accessories, but more about them at the end of the video. So, Caradora, Heart of Alacria. They are a 4-cost 4/2. When they enter, you get to tutor up a mount or vehicle from your deck, so already super good, and is going to play a key piece of synergy with the first mount that we go to kind of tutor up every time, assuming they weren't already in our hand from the start. But they also have an added ability. Whenever a +1/+1 counter would be put onto a creature or vehicle you control, gets an extra one. So, that being said, we're really looking to abuse +1/+1 counters, kind of just build a very huge mount vehicle lineup, protect our board, and swing for those fences, right? We're not going to touch on every single card in the deck, just because I don't think that makes a ton of sense. This deck isn't 100% optimized, right? This is built from what I had on hand, and while it's a lot of good mountain vehicle support, it's not all the mountain vehicle support one could want. So we will touch on some of the things that I'm missing, again, kind of towards the end of the video, but let's start off with those mounts, right? Brightfield Mustang. So Brightfield Mustang, super cheap to pick up. It's a common. It's a 3-cost. Nope. It's a 4-cost 3/3. You can saddle it for 1, so basically any creature in your entire deck could saddle this bad boy. Whenever they attack while saddled, you untap them and give them a +1/+1 counter. So I think a 4/4 that is pseudo-vigilant the first time it attacks is good, and it's just going to get stronger from there. So despite being a common, I kind of love them. District Mascot. You know them, you love them. They're such a good boy, right? This is a 1-cost 0/0, but it does enter with a +1/+1 counter on it. You can pay 1 green to remove 2 +1/+1 counters from it to destroy an artifact. It again has saddle for 1, so pretty good. And whenever it attacks while saddled, it gets another +1/+1 counter. Fortune Loyal Steed. Yes. Yes. Fortune Loyal Steed is the chef's kiss of this deck. It's always what we're going to tutor for, assuming we didn't already have it in our opening hand. Why? Because Fortune Loyal Steed has quite a few things going for it. First and foremost, it's a 3-cost 2/4. Love those stats, right? 4 health is kind of like the threshold of a little harder to remove through damage effects. Feels pretty safe to attack with. You know, we're really loving it. When it enters, we're going to scry 2. Cool. Saddle 1 again, right? Again, any creature can saddle this. We generally are going to aim to have our commander saddle it, though. Whenever it attacks while saddled, at the end of combat, it and whatever creature flickered it get to flicker, right? They're going to pop off our board and pop right back down. So 1, we have a pseudo-vigilance, really kind of for both of them, right? They can now both act as blockers. We love this. 2, we get to re-trigger Fortune Loyal Steed. That's another scry 2 for us. And third of all, our commander re-entering is going to let us tutor up another one of our mounts or vehicles. And I don't know if you know this, tutoring is good. And it's like, yeah, it's not a generic tutor for whatever you want, so it's not as powerful as, say, like a demonic tutor or something. But in this deck, with so many mounts and vehicles, and those honestly being some of the key pieces that you're looking for, it's very strong. Glory Heath Lynx is going to follow that up. This is a 2/3 for 2. Has lifelink, kind of here for that. Whenever it attacks while saddled, we get to look for a plains and just put it into our hand. Granted, it has to be a basic plains, a little sad about that. But the ability to thin our deck and make sure we're never missing land drops is still nice. Guardian Sunmare. Guardian Sunmare, in my mind, is honestly what we're tutoring for second. So Guardian Sunmare is a 5/5 for 5. It has Ward 2, Saddle of 4, which is a little high, but again, our commander can, they can fulfill that saddle requirement, no issues. Whenever they attack while saddled, we get to go grab anything that costs 3 or less from our deck and just slam it onto the battlefield. That could be any number of, our creatures, most of whom fall under that range. We have a decent number of little support bits that also fall under that range, and we're pretty happy with it. Lagoran, Soul of Alacria. So this is another mount. They're a 1/1 flyer for little Selesnya. Whenever they attack while saddled, you get to put +1/+1 counter on each of up to 2 target vehicles and mounts, and has a saddle of 1. So the +1/+1 counter synergy works really well, again, with our commander, who's going to put an extra 1 on each of those 2 creatures. And flying in commander, from my experience, not even just commander, any kind of limited format, is just super good. Your opponents aren't all going to always have reach or flying, meaning this is just free damage, baby. Ornery Tumblewag. So this is a 2/2 for 3, but at the beginning of combat, you do get to pass out a little +1/+1 counter to a creature. Already good. Whenever it attacks while saddled, you get to double the +1/+1 counters on a creature. Generally, itself, but there could be instances where it makes more sense to double up someone else's and just let him have, whatever his stats may be. Saddle cost of 2, low enough to the ground that, again, most of our creatures can saddle this bad boy. Seraphic Steed. So this is another little Selesnya guy, 2/2, first strike lifelink. Whenever it attacks while saddled, we get to create an angel. These angel tokens are great, because they can also help to saddle our creatures. And the saddle cost is 4, which again, a little high, but our commander fulfills that, so I'm not that worried about it. Unswerving Sloth. So Unswerving Sloth is, again, a chef's kiss moment at an uncommon, so I'm pretty here for it. They're a 5/5 for 5. Whenever they attack while saddled, they gain indestructible and untap all of our creatures. Again, saddle cost of 4, a little high, but we have ways of pumping the rest of our board. Our commander can always take care of this for us. We have ways of getting these saddles. Dropping down into our artifacts, which means we're hitting up on these vehicles, we have the Air Response Unit. So a 3/3 for 3 with Flying, Vigilance, and Crew 1. Just a nice kind of aerial body. They probably get cut once I pick up some of the cards I'm missing for this deck, but I do like them in general. Earth Rumbler. So Earth Rumbler is a big boy. This is a 5-cost, 7/6 with Vigilance, Trample, Crew 3. We can exile an artifact or creature card from our graveyard to turn it into a creature for the turn as well. So, we have a good number of ways of ensuring that this thing is swinging for the fences, and that trample damage is going to go a long way. Asikia's Chariot. I think Asikia's Chariot is great here, right? It's going to come in, create 2/2/2 cats, which could crew the Asikia's Chariot if we wanted to. They could also crew or mount any of our other creatures. They're a 4/4, and whenever they attack, we get to create a token that's a copy of another token we already control. That could be the cats, it could be the angels from earlier. We don't have a ton of other kind of token generation outside of a few pilot effects here and there, but I don't think we need to. Getaway Car. So Getaway Car is a 4/3 with haste for 3 mana. Crew 1, so super low crew cost. Whenever it attacks or blocks, we can return a creature that crewed it to its owner's hand, allowing us to abuse ETB effects. Lumbering World Wagon. So this is a star 4 for 3 mana. Its power is going to be equal to the number of lands we control, and whenever it enters or attacks, we get to go grab a basic, slam it onto the battlefield tapped. We're pretty happy with it. Skyseer's Chariot is a little taxation, right? So it's a 3/3 flying vehicle, crew 2, so pretty reasonable. Whenever it enters, we choose a non-land card name, and we make the activated abilities of that card cost 2 more to activate. Valor's Flagships. This is a little on the expensive side with 7 mana, 3 of it having to be white, but not that concerned, right? We have plenty of ways of kind of ensuring we're going to get our mana fixed here. Not all that worried. But flying, First Strike, Lifelink, all of which are great. Crew for 3. We could cycle it away to create pilots. But honestly, I'm kind of here for it as a vehicle. I could see moments where it might make more sense to cycle it just to get a bunch of pilots to crew and mount our vehicles. But all in all, it's good either way. Veloheart Bike. So this is a 4/2 for 3 mana. Enters, we gain 2 life, which is kind of whatever. It also acts as basically a mana rock that could be a creature because we could tap it for mana of any color. It's one of those cards where, like, I might consider cutting it as well whenever I get any of the cards that I'm missing. Let's get into the support for all of these mounts and vehicles, though. We're going to start off with a Canyon Vaulter. This is a 3/1 for 2. Whenever it saddles or crews a mount or vehicle, that creature gains flying for the turn, which is so good. Again, flying is excellent in Commander. Good evasion is going to let us get in for damage, and that damage, as we know, is likely increasing from turn to turn. Cloud Spire Captain. This is another pilot. So 2/3 for 3 mana. Mounts and vehicles just get in a little anthem, little +1/+1 action. And it saddles as though its power were 2 greater, meaning all those things that require 4, this could still go ahead and crew/mount them. You know them, you love them, it's the Interface Ace. Another pilot, right? This is a 0/4 for 2 mana, which is already good on its own, right? We're going to be able to take this out onto the field really early on and just sort of block for days. It crews and mounts, or crews and saddles rather, based off of its toughness rather than its power. So, again, a nice early drop that's going to crew or mount for 4. Whenever it becomes tapped for the first time during our turn, it untaps itself. So we have 2 options here, really, right? We could crew or saddle, have it untap, and just hang as a blocker. Or we could have it crew or saddle, 2 different things. Both options are great in my mind. Intrepid Stablemaster. So this isn't helping us crew or mount per se, but it is helping us cast things. This is a 2/2 for 2 with reach. It is a mana dork that taps for green, or we could have it tap for 2 mana of any one color, specifically for these mounts and vehicles. Kona Rescue Beastie. Yes. So Kona is phenomenal in this deck. 4/3 for 4 mana. Love those stats for us. Why? Because a lot of our things kind of cap out at that 4 crew or saddle, level. They also have survival. So if they're tapped during our second main phase, our post-combat main phase, if you will, we get to just cheat a creature from our hand out onto the field. And we could do that as early as turn 4. And granted, we don't have a ton of creatures that are super expensive to cast. But free creatures is still good, and I think that they are valuable here. In a similar vein, we have the Reluctant Role Model. So Reluctant Role Model is a little on the smaller side, at least initially. They're a 2/2 for 2. They also have survival, but theirs says if they're tapped at the beginning of our second main phase, they get a flying, lifelink, or +1/+1 counter. Whenever they or another creature we control that had counters on it dies, we get to move those counters onto something else. So they're really fulfilling quite a few roles here. One, they're getting bigger, right? Up until the point where they have at least 2 counters on them so that they can basically crew or mount anything. We're going to choose those +1/+1 counters, but should our creatures that have counters on them die, we're like, whoa, hold on. All that extra power I gave you, let me just take it, slam it over here. Not a ton of non-creature based support for these kind of archetypes in the deck, but we do have Alacrian Armory. Came across this artifact during the pre-release, and it's so good. 4 mana gives all of our creatures +0, +1, and vigilance, which alone is decent, right? I don't know that I would pay 4 mana for that. Maybe I would. Who's to say? The important part for us, though, is that at the beginning of combat on our turn, we get to choose a mount or vehicle and just have it do its thing. No creature required, right? Alright, we're going to touch on some +1/+1 counter support, move into the things that we're missing, and ultimately call it a happy. Stick with me. So, we are running Champion of Lamholt. So Champion of Lamholt is a 1/1 for 3, but whenever any other creature enters the battlefield under our control, they're going to get a +1/+1 counter. And creatures that have power less than the champion can't block any of our creatures. It's a really good way of being like, hey, you can't block any of my stuff. If we have the Reluctant Role Model out, it's also a situation where it's like, okay, they have targeted removal. Do they get rid of the champion, knowing that all the power it has is going to get transferred onto something else? Do they get rid of the role model first, hoping someone else has another piece of removal, so that power isn't getting divvied up? You know, what are we going to do here? Gnarled Colony. So Gnarled Colony could be kicked. If you kick it, it's going to cost 5. Otherwise, it's a 2/2 for 2. If you kick it, it comes in with 2 counters. And each creature we control with a +1/+1 counter on it has trample. Good Fortune Unicorn. 2/2 for 3. Any other creature enters, comes in with a +1/+1 counter. Kinda here for it. Luminarch Aspirant. So this is a 1/1 for 2. Beginning of combat, we get to pass out a +1/+1 counter. We can give it to the Luminarch Aspirant if we want to make it so that they could crew or mount things a little better. Again, up until the point where we hit about 4 power and toughness, at which point we kind of don't need to care as much anymore. Metastic Evangel. This is a 2-cost 3/1. Whenever a non-token creature enters the battlefield under our control, we get to proliferate. Mowu, Loyal Companion. 3-cost, nope, 4-cost 3/3, there we go. Trample Vigilance. If one or more counters will be put on it, it gets that many +1 extra. Selfless Squire. So Selfless Squire is a bit of protection for us. We're actually going to touch on the protection. We have a fair bit of it. I lied. I apologize. But they're a flashable 1/1 for 4 mana. And it's like, mech, they better have a damn good ability. They do. So whenever they enter, we're going to prevent all damage that will be dealt to us. And for each piece of damage prevented, they get a +1/+1 counter. Sticking with our +1/+1 support and dropping down into our artifacts, we have the Ozolith. I had a spare copy lying around. It is like a $30 card, so I understand if not everyone's going to rush out and pick this up for this deck. But it's solid, right? We're taking all those +1/+1 counters we've been passing around and just sort of like letting them shift off for a moment and come right back. Citadel Siege is up next. 4 mana, enchantment, we get to choose one of 2 modes when it enters. We're either going to pass out 2 +1/+1 counters to a creature at the start of each of our combats, or at the start of each of our opponent's combats, we're going to go ahead and tap down a creature that they control. Felidar Retreat. So Felidar Retreat is another 4-cost enchantment. Has landfall. That landfall could make us cats. Those cats could crew or mount our vehicles and mounts. Or we can put a +1/+1 counter on each creature we control. Both effects are very strong. Of course, we're running Hardened Scales. Hardened Scales is a 1-cost enchantment that says, hey, you putting some +1/+1 counters and stuff? Yeah, go ahead and have an extra one on me. Innkeeper's Talent. So beginning of combat, we get to pass out a +1/+1 counter. Already good. Leveled up. All of our creatures that have counters, guess what? Ward 1. A little harder to interact with. We can level it up once again. And then it's like, hey, you passing out +1/+1 counters? Go ahead and double those bad boys. And last but not least, for our +1/+1 counter support, we are running Sylvan Scavenging. This is a 3-cost enchantment. Beginning of our end step, we get to choose one. So either we're putting a +1/+1 counter onto a creature, or we're creating a 3/3 raccoon. But to do so, we do need to have a creature with at least 4 power. That won't be a problem ever. Both effects are good. Really depends on board state in terms of what you choose, but I like them both. Let's protect our boys, right? We have a lot of creatures. They're generally big. And board wipes become very tempting based on that kind of a board state. So we need to protect them, and we're going to do so with things like Unbreakable Formation. So instant for 3 mana, bam, immediately we have Indestructible. If we cast it during our main phase, though, we get a +1/+1 counter on each of our creatures. We have a bunch of effects that could increase the number of those that we're passing out. And they gain Vigilance. So pretty happy with it. Teferi's Protection, you know it, you love it. It is a game changer. Oh, you're going to wipe the board? Well, we're phased out, actually. Leave us alone. We'll kill you when we get back. Take Up the Shield. So Take Up the Shield is nice. This is a 2-cost instant. Gives a counter. Gives lifelink. Gives Indestructible. Snakeskin Veil. +1/+1 counter. Hexproof. So a nice way of basically forcing a fizzle. Heroic Intervention. So permanents we control gain hexproof and indestructible. Again, protecting our whole board. Gaia's Gift. So Gaia's Gift is strong. So 2 mana, gives a counter. Also gives out Reach, Trample, Hexproof, and Indestructible. Granted, for the turn, but for 2 mana, it just feels like a lot. Defend the Rider. So this is actually another way we could create pilots, but it's really in here for that protection side. So target permanent we control gains hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. All for a single green mana. Seems good. Last of our protection pieces is Dawn's Truce. So we could gift a card. Depending on what's happening, we're definitely going to. But we and permanents we control gain hexproof until end of turn. If this gift was promised, they also gain indestructible. Now, like I said earlier, we are missing some things that I would like to see in the deck. That I just don't happen to have cracked in my packs. I'll probably end up picking up at one point or another. We're going to start with the Bulwark Ox. So Bulwark Ox is a 2/2 for 2, which is already fine value. Whenever it attacks while saddled, it does get a +1/+1 counter onto any creature, but generally speaking, probably itself, right? We want to make it big enough where it can pretty freely attack and, at the very least, trade for multiple creatures. We could also sacrifice this creature, and creatures we control that have counters on them gain hexproof and indestructible until end of turn. Both effects are good. This guy's super budget as well. He's like a 30-cent card. I won't have any issues picking him up. Miriam Herd Whisperer. I think I actually own a copy of this. I just didn't find it while building the deck. I have a lot of boxes. You see some here. There's a bunch all over this wall over here. And although it's somewhat organized, it's not as organized as I kind of needed to be. Another project for another day, though. But Miriam, right? We're focused. This is a 3/2 for 2. As long as it's our turn, mounted vehicles we have all get hexproof, which is pretty nice. Whenever a mount or vehicle we control attacks, it gets a +1/+1 counter. Feels like a no-brainer here, right? Bounding Felidar. So Bounding Felidar fits this strategy to a T. They're a 6-cost 4/7. Not bad stats. Whenever they attack while saddled, that saddle cost is 2. We get to put a +1/+1 counter on each other creature we control, and gain 1 life for each of those creatures. Thunderous Velocipede. So 5/5 vehicle for 3 mana. It does have trample. Each other vehicle we control enters with an additional +1/+1 counter on it if its mana value is 4 or less. Otherwise, it comes in with 3. I don't know that I actually want to lean further into vehicles, but it is good in the deck. Wily Duke, a teen hero. I know I don't own this because I do have my rares pulled out into like separate binders. But again, super cheap to pick up, like a 20-cent rare. They're a 4/2 with Vigilance. Whenever they become tapped, we get to gain a life and draw a card. And what's that? 4 power. You could crew or mount anything in my deck, and you're going to draw me cards and gain me a life? Hell yeah. Congregation Griff. I don't know that I want to necessarily run this. I do think it's good, right? So it's a 3 cost, 1/4, flying with lifelink. Saddle cost is 3. And whenever it attacks, it gets +X/+X, where X is the number of mounts we control. And although I think that's decent, I don't know that it's as strong as I would like it to be. Rip Spawn Hunter. So this is another survival card. I think it's pretty decent, right? So it's a 4/4 for 4. Again, we love that 4 stat. We're here for it. If we have it tapped during our second main phase, we get to reveal the top X cards, where X is its power. And as we're modulating power with +1/+1 counters, it could be more than 4 cards, but as a baseline, looking at the top 4 is decent. Any number of creatures or vehicles that have different powers we could add to our hand. So just a ton of card draw, effectively. Also super cheap to pick up. It's like a 12-cent card, so I will eventually probably pick it up. And the last thing that I'd really want to add to this deck without making it like kind of overly powerful, which I'm pretty sure I own copies, I just need to find them again in the boxes, is Kutzil Melmet Exemplar. He's just stupid good in a deck like this. He stops our opponents from casting spells on our turn. We love this. Whenever we attack with a creature that has greater power than its base, we get to draw a card. Lied slightly, they do need to deal damage. It's not just on attack. But card draw, plus everything else, just seems good. Kind of here for it. We didn't touch on the lands. We almost never do in these upgrade guides. I don't think I have anything that's like super interesting anyways. No, I don't. I mean, like, you could obviously run like a Karn's Bastion for some proliferation if you wanted to. There's other things that do +1/+1 counter shenanigans. They're all good. Not gonna touch on them. But guys, I am Mechanized Minion. I am the Energy King. We actually are getting in our second camera and our extra lapel mics. So we should be able to, once we figure out the proper setup and make sure that all the mics work the way we need them to and do some like test footage, finally start to do some Commander gameplay videos. Thank you, tax return. But what did you think of the deck? Are there cards that I have in here that you're like, oh, that feels a little weak, you should probably cut it? Are there cards, aside from the ones that I mentioned, that you're like, Mech, this definitely belongs in here? You want to play with a little bit of power without, going all the way into CDH. Also, what do you guys think of the new bracket system? I know it's in beta, and it's a little bit art, a little bit science, right? It's not an exact 1-to-1, which is why things like Moxfield kind of telling you how many game changers you have in your deck, and maybe also figuring out like your combos. But I think it's strictly based on game changers is how they're assigning levels and whatnot. The tool's definitely in its infancy. But what do you guys think about the bracket system? Should I do a whole video on it? I know a lot of other channels already have videos on it, so I don't feel like I'm adding a lot to the conversation, which is why I wasn't planning on doing one. But if you guys want me to do one, I'm happy to make one. We're also going to start doing some set reviews. I have a couple other custom decks from this set that I kind of want to build, and I'll probably do deck text on as well. It's all about finding time to record and edit, and I have other projects going on in life, and it's just like, But, as always, these videos are brought to you by Arcane Fortress, makers of fine TCG accessories, including deck boxes, sleeves, binders, playmats, you name it, they make it. And there's a link down in the description, which would save you 5% off of your purchase from them, which also helps to support the channel. Of course, you never need to spend any money to support us. You could just like, comment, subscribe, share the video with friends. But until next time, good luck with your builds.